So we're going to talk today about nomadic entrepreneurship. I'll explain what it means. First of all, a little bit about myself and my own lifestyle. So basically, this thing, the map, is my life in the last 5 years. Basically, what I'm doing is changing a place every 2 months. So in the last 5 years, I started in India, and then I went to South America and Europe and so on. I basically stay in a place for 2 months, do a lot of work working on my startups, and then change to another place. And that's why I think they call it nomadic lifestyle. Nomadic lifestyle is basically a decision to keep on changing locations, and that's what I do. And yeah, I have to add Poland now to the map. That's my first time in Poland. Now, let's talk for a second about why should you consider living a nomadic lifestyle. Someone here is living a nomad? Do we have nomads in the crowd? Someone? No, okay. So let me try to convince you a little bit about why it might make sense. So when I think about the reasons of why to become a nomad, actually the same reasons go to why should you start your own startup. It's exactly the same, and I'll try to explain. The first reason is basically when you're a nomad and when you have your startup, you're free. Or in other words, you're your own boss. You no longer have a boss, which is great because not having a boss for a lot of years makes you feel kind of good. The other thing is basically that every day everything is new and you learn a lot about yourself and about the world. So imagine that you live 2 months in Mumbai and then you switch 2 months in Paraguay and so on. And then you go to Katowice. Every day looks really different, and it kind of gives you a little bit of inspiration to your life. And the ups and downs make life really interesting because when you don't have information and you keep on changing places, there are lots of ups and downs, really good moments that you see something for the first time and you love it, and some bad moments. For example, today in Katowice on the tram, I paid $4.80 for a ticket instead of $2.80 in Krakow. I still don't understand why. So sometimes you have those surprises that are really, you can't really deal with. But okay, now let's talk a little bit about what I do. So I build startup while traveling. I'm not only traveling, I work about 10 hours a day on building my own startups, and let me tell you a little bit of a sign, because some of you here are thinking, should I start my own startup, yes or no? So when is a good time to go for it, or should you go for it? So I think you should start a startup if you're not happy, if you feel a little bit stuck in your life, and you think there is more to life than what you have now. Which means basically that all of you kind of have to start a startup, in my opinion. But then again, once you decided that you have to start a startup, the question is, when is the best time to do it? So, because some of us are thinking, yeah, I have to start a startup right now. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to give away on anything I have. And I think that the best time to start a startup is that when life gives you a break. And I'm going to give you an example from my own life. I started my startup. I was working as an accountant in Israel, and I had a very serious relationship, almost got married. And in the same month, they fired me from my job in KPMG, and my girlfriend left me in the same month. So I like to think of it like I got fired twice in the same month. And then when something like that happens, and the second thing happens, no one depends on you. Because basically when you lose everything you have, you're capable of starting a new thing, which is exactly what I did. And the last thing I would recommend for those of you who want to start a startup is start a startup when you have a little bit of money, because you're going to lose money in the beginning when you start a startup. It's never going to give you money in the first or 2 months. So have a little bit of money. Usually startups are profitable after 2 years. So you should know the statistics. Now, let me talk a little bit about what I did, or how do I travel while building my startup on the same time. I called it the subsidy model. Why do I call it the subsidy model? Because something has to pay for what you do. which basically means nobody's going to fund my travels, and nobody's also going to fund your startups. So something has to pay for it. You should always have a channel that feeds oxygen to your next channel, in this case, a startup. So just want to mention some of the channels you can use and you can do right now in order to start a startup. The first thing I did while starting Lingolearn, my first startup, was freelancing or consulting. The good things about consulting, and I use Elance for that, they no longer exist, but there are a lot of web pages you can use to actually start freelancing online. The good thing is that you have 100% cash flow, which is profitable. Startups usually lose money. As a consultant, you're going to make money on day one. And the nice thing is that you learn from other people's mistakes. So I work for other people that are doing the same things I'm doing now online, and you learn from their mistakes, and you check out what exactly should be done and what shouldn't be done, and that was a great channel. This one is my first startup. It's basically called Lingolearn, and I started it in 2010. We teach about 20 languages online. The site looks exactly how it used to be when we started 5 years ago, which is something I'm not proud of, but what I want to show you basically in this page is that it's really easy to start a startup. The only thing you need is to have a web page, a very simple web page, and the form of contact me, and that's it. No big technology, you don't have to shoot a rocket to the moon, nothing like it. Really, really easy and can be very, very cheap. Some of the things I wanted to tell you about my experience with Lingolearn is that we spent $5,000 on it to start it, and that's all. Today, it's very, very cheap to start your own startup. Everything comes cheap. Like you have Dropbox, you have Skype, things that used to cost a lot of money 10 years ago are now super cheap. We were 2 co-founders and we stayed together, and this is something that I want to tell all of you who are thinking about starting a startup. If you can find a co-founder, do so, because starting a startup on your own is, first of all, not fun, and you're just going 50% of the speed you could have gone with a co-founder. So whatever you do, find a co-founder. And some startups need only marketing without technology, which means the following. When we started Lingolearn, we said, okay, who's going to do the technology? We need a CTO. We need someone who does coding. Some startups do not need that. And Lingolearn is a great example. All you need is a page. That's it. If we would have had the CTO and gave him 30% of the equity, there would be nothing to do with him later. So that's like a good example. The first student of Lingolearn came in the first month, and this is a lesson that I think is really important for startups. If you can start selling as soon as possible, you're better off. So instead of doing big plans and then thinking maybe in about 6 months or 1 year, if you can start selling in the same month you start your startup, and usually that is the case, you should seriously consider to do it. Instead of being a perfectionist working on something for months and years and then seeing that it has no demand. And we had the first investor in 2015, which means only 5 years after we started the startup, someone came to us and gave us money. And that's great, because it's better with investors, instead of you running out after them, that they're going to run after you. So my point is, if you can start a startup and make your clients your first investors, you're a lot better off. The conclusion for Lingolearn is very, very simple: daily grind for years. And that means that when you have a startup, the only most important thing you have to understand is that you have to show up to work on your startups for hours every day. No giving up, not thinking if it's worth it or not. You simply work until it either dies or becomes successful. And I've seen a lot of people who quit way before time. My second startup is basically StartupBlink. Now, I'm funding StartupBlink with the money I'm making with Lingolearn now. So if I just repeat it, I used to fund Lingolearn with the money I did when I was freelancer, and now I'm funding StartupBlink with the money I'm making on Lingolearn. So always there is a channel that funds the next channel. Some things about StartupBlink: teams fall apart. So if you have co-founders, be very aware that there is very high risk of you losing at least 50% of your co-founders in the first year. It happens all the time. So what I suggest is that when you start a startup with a team, have a clear agreement. There is a saying in Italian: clear agreement, good friendship. It's good for your friendship as well to have a clear agreement. Sometimes investors are a must. StartupBlink has investors because it's very technological business and very far away from the market. So sometimes in some types of startups, you must have investors. If you have a startup, I suggest that you speak about it at any opportunity you have, just like I'm doing here. Your biggest worry is that nobody wants your product or nobody cares about your product. We think that our biggest worry is competitors, people stealing our ideas, and basically I have to tell you, nobody cares about your idea. Everyone cares about their idea. They think it's the best idea in the world. So don't play defensive. When you have a startup, talk about it, find a co-founder, find an investor, find your clients more than anything. Talk about it all the time. Don't hide anything. Professional investors are really hard to get. All of you that are running after VCs, angels, and so on, do know that the money people usually raise for startups comes from themselves or their family. That's basically the only options to start with startup funding. And one more lesson is basically if you build something interesting, people will talk about it. So we built StartupBlink and we got articles about it in CNN Money, in Forbes, The Next Web. Guy Kawasaki is helping us with social media. You don't have to have a lot of money to get some traction. Just build something cool, and people will talk about it. It will go viral. So just in conclusion, I think that the most important thing is to decide what you want from life. Do you want a huge startup that's going to make a lot of money, or do you want a startup that can sustain your lifestyle? Both options are great. Just decide in advance which one do you want to pursue. Because some people are trying to build a huge startup with very, very low resources, and some people are trying to build a lifestyle business that will make about $5,000 a month or $10,000 and are trying to get investors. So just know which one you want. Once you know which one you want, you can build your startup accordingly. One reason to build a startup, and I think the best reason to build a startup, is actually for your freedom and not for money. So a lot of us, when we think startup, we're saying, whoa, this is big money and I'm going to make big money. But the idea is that you actually build a startup to become free from your boss, to have the liberty to go to swim whenever you want in the middle of the day. This is the big price that a startup actually gives you. And what I saw, that living as a nomad in a nomadic lifestyle and founding a startup are really both the same, which basically means that the journey is a lot more important than getting there. So when you build your startup, don't always think about the exit or getting there. Enjoy the road, just like traveling is. You don't really want to get anywhere and stay there. It's all about constantly improving and seeing new things, and that's what startups are all about, and that's what makes them really, really interesting. And that's basically it. Dziękuję. Thank you.